So continuing our previous thing, how materialism as a philosophy, which was cemented or consolidated by the late materialistic scholastic debates, where materialism was on the cusp or being getting formulated and perhaps dominating the discourse through Kant, through the interpretations of how Kant had just formulated transcendental idealism. So just continuing with the this thing. So after Kant, for example, if you quote, he says that philosophical materialism since Kant. So, for example, if he says that England, France, and Netherlands are the true homes of modern philosophy, retired towards the end of last century from a theatre of metaphysical war. So since Hume in England produced no great philosopher unless we have to concede the rank of John Stuart Mill. So how this debate of philosophical materialism somehow got how it evolved in different countries and transmigrated, how it got translated and transconfigurated once ideas spread from one place to other place in terms of not only through geographies but as the hidden as how human as individuals who translate or transform them or make us them make for us make give a picture which is which you can take which has subjective as well as objective which we can from which you can infer subjective as well as objective elements. For example, if you say, if I'm reading some of the passages, for example, for example, to quote, the philosopher is sum of tradition. This is what I was saying, and experience of brain structures and environment of opportunity and study of health and society. So the heady mix of all these things go in the making of a philosophy, and that too, even a materialistic philosophy. It has ingredients of all the mix of these factors. So, for example, I'll just quote him what he says. That Kant, in his thinking, especially in his pre-critical period, he not unfrequently very comes very near to materialism. His pupil and opponent Further was thoroughly imbued with scientific modes of thought and might perhaps have been able to do much more of development of scientific sense in Germany if had been content to the work of his ideas in positive fashion instead of engaging with Kant in a controversy over the principles bitter and full of misunderstandings. So what I was saying, the Kantian way of how materialism as a philosophy just passed through him. So Kant had his philosophy as a significant elements of materialism and skepticism and idealism, or you can say empiricism and idealism marrying happily in Kant's transcendental idealism. But the you can say that Kant was not a total materialist. So have a, you can have a, what I should say, in a nuanced. You can articulate a nuanced distance. Not distance, you can differences between Kantianism and materialism per se. If you want to just take it. So, for example, in the context of Hegel and Schelling and Herbert and other people, and for example, God was my first thought, reason my second, man my third, and lost thought. By this expression, Feuerbach denotes not so much different phases of his philosophy as rather merely the stadia of his youthful development, for soon after his habilitation he openly set forth the principle of his humanity philosophy, to which afterwards he held unshakably fast. So the different philosophers maybe had shifted here and there. Maybe you can also place Kantian understanding of things. You can just locate it there. Truth's reality, sensibility are identical. Only a sensible being is true, a real being. Only sensibility is truth and reality. Only through the senses is an object in the true sense given, not through the thought in itself. So this is an important point which I would rather make, that, for example, even we make sensibility a principle, still in essential foundation of the system, be it Aristotelian, Spinozist, and even Kantian. The notion of sensibility, or in order on modern day constructions of sense perceptions, or what is the external the data of which we construe from externality of our beings, and how we just process it. Uh, uh, so that that data, or that what our senses can perceive. So this is essential ingredient, not only in Aristotelian, but in Spinoza's philosophy, and as well as in Kantian way of looking things. So, for example, human sensations have no empirical anthropological meaning in the sense of all transcendental philosophy. They have an ontological metaphysical meaning, that is sensation. In sensation, yes, in everyday sensations are concealed the deepest and the highest truths. Uh, so existence is a secret. So in the light of digression, so if you want to critique from the point of view of philosophy of materialism, sense perception, or how we construe the data, or what we from outside. So that's an end in itself, but that doesn't have some metaphysical import beneath in it. While in case of, if you want to take a critique of philosophical materialism, the other part of other side of the story is that existence is the secret of intuition, of sensation, of love. Only sensation, only in this love. So human sensations have no empirical anthropological meaning in the sense of all transcendental philosophy. They have an ontological metaphysical meaning. In sensation, yes, in everyday sensations are conceived the deepest and higher truths. If you want to see that sensations are not to be taken at face value only. So, 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 so it has a different what it wants to. It says is something different. If sensations are the base of metaphysical element, they must also, psychologically speaking, be the proper substance of everything intellectual. That's it. Now, what comes, which is often said. So, where the common adage, wearer knows where the shoe pinches. So, in the construction of these doctrines or ideologies or philosophies, so it is the mix of theory and experiment, phenomenology and theorization, and its conceptualization, and its concretization in some realm, its application, or its functionality, the mix of the two things, which just makes a theory, or which makes a conceptualization acceptable or not. So that mix of theorization and application just imports us to just a certain, for example, a shoe is in certain respect best judged by the shoemaker, in others by the wearer also, and in others by an anatomist or a painter. Or so there are different ways of looking at a reality. The shoemaker makes from a factory outlet, so it, for him, he sees shoes in a certain way, a design of it. The wearer sees it in his own way, the artist sees it in his own way. So you can say, if you, the same can be applied to a philosophy, a given philosophy. You may be a materialist, you may be an idealist, you may be a pragmatist, or you may be an what I should say, different varieties, or having some elements of this and some elements of that. So question is how you have to judge them within these parameters of utility. You can say utilitarianism is also a philosophy, but you can say how better theory and experiment, if we use a common modern day way, how better and theory and experiment can are, the more they are closer to a, the more our explanations are sound. So he who has diligently diversed the whole realm of natural sciences in order to obtain a picture of whole will often see the meaning of a particular fact better than its discoverer. So the act of discovery, it's normally construed as it's more important, but even the process of discovery or contextualization of discovery, or within the existing paradigms of knowledge is according to author more important than the act of discovery. So the epistemology of things for him is carrying more sense than a person who just contextualizes, or an epistemologist is more important in the theories of knowledge as compared to the giving a particular idea or a particular school of that thing. The matter of contextualization is very much important. So we see, moreover, the task of man who seeks to such a collective picture of nature is essentially philosophical. And we may ask whether the materialist may not far more justly be charged with the philosophical dilettantism. So he used the word dilettantism is a word which means that a person who just meanders into other schools of branch of learning without actually taking it seriously. He is not serious. If he just ventures into a branch of knowledge, he just is not seriously going to venture it. So if materialist is negating or accepting or an alternate way of looking at things, it doesn't mean that he is taking it seriously in a serious manner. Uh, so what is meant by trained historian, philologist, chemist? But among philosophers, the term is most part only misapplied. So even the current our in our times also, we just with heavy emphasis on specializations for specialization. Specialization as a thing is somehow more appreciated. You may not a generalist is not. In the previous times, epistemologists, journalists, philosophers, before the coming of materialism before embracing materialism as a philosophy, one of the overshoots of materialism is that philosophical materialism is that it has led us to the taking a heavy price on specialization, over specialization, super specialization. So it's different. This philosophical roots of materialism and its after effects. So if you want to question them, you have to go to those debates where philosophical materialism somehow just crystallized or got cemented, and somehow it displaced other inquiries in a non-serious. They did not take other inquiries, and it somehow started to be on the cusp in the late after post Kantian understanding of things. So this is that state of thing what he's trying to come up with. Uh, Above all things, a strict logical education in a serious and close attention to the rules of formal logic and basis of all modern science in the doctrine of probabilities and theory of induction. But where in our days is such an education to be found? Hardly one, so this is what I was the malady of our time. Hardly one university professor in 10 possesses it, and at least of all, it is found amongst the. So that's what I'm saying. So this having a holistic way of looking at things. So it has its roots in back in history. That's it. So if we just for example, how if you just want to see how materialism as such, so materialism, there is nothing also what materialism, philosophical materialism, there is nothing outside nature. Nature is the first objection to the demand of philosophy. What we should seek a wider basis. Your metaphysics is science falsely so called, without any sure basis. Your psychology is nothing without the physiology of brain and nervous system. And as to logic, our successes are best proof that we are better placed as to the laws of thought than you with your important scholastic formulas. And means the one side of philosophical materialism is that in the, for example, psychology and philosophy can be traced to physiology of what you can catch, physiology of neural systems, nervous systems, or logic can be traced to the laws of thought and its successes. And ethic and aesthetic have nothing to do with the theoretical basis of philosophy and may be constructed from materialistic foundations. So this is a viewpoint which was not, it might not have been prevalent at that time, but it got succeeded, it got this explanation, got even, it got cemented, or it got, what under these circumstances can the philosophy do us? So the whole way of looking at the matter rests upon one-sided references to our post-Kantian philosophy. So this is an important point which he is trying to say. This whole way of looking at matter rests upon one-sided references to our post-Kantian philosophy. So the post-success of philosophical materialism in the background philosophies which might have been there. So we are in our modern day curricula or understanding of things, we are not aware of that thing. We take it as a pre-given. That's the post-Kantian philosophy was basically in the background of Descartes, Schelling, Hegel, Neo-Aristotelian, and other recent schools. Is only well calculated to justify the repugnance with which scientific men usually turn away from philosophy. But on the other hand, the whole principle of modern philosophy, if we do not include in that term the corruptions of German philosophy. So philosophy as such is denigrated even in the history of science and philosophy of science. For example, even a working physicist or even a working theoretical physicist, or they will not basically they have some sort of unconscious repugnance to philosophy as such. So for example, I'm reminded of Feynman's, if you read a particular, surely you are joking Mr. Feynman, you will see that he is somehow making a fun of a philosopher, that he, what is philosophy of science? Like an orientalist, a bird watcher, he is only interested in classifying the birds, but I'm interested in that basic theory. So what if you take Feynman as one of the successful 20th century physicists, so he can say his attitude of scientific empiricism, which is a particular way of working on a certain this philosophy, it's not it's deriding of that thing, but basically what the author wants to say that the wholesale acceptance of post-Kantian philosophy and wholesale acceptance of those very things somehow misses the facts, the background debates within that thing which was developing. So that's an important point. So whether it's for good or bad, maybe he's not comfortable with that. But this is a point he's trying to make. For example, the relationship of philosophy to materialism at length attains the utmost clearness in the Kant, the man who first developed the doctrine of have origin of heavily bought. So you can say philosophical materialism had one of the protagonists, one of the advocates, sophisticated advocates in the philosophy of Kant, who somehow could see, for example, he said that I'm interested in two things, the moral law and the heavenly stars. He could see the motions of planets in the order of Newtonian mechanics, and the Darwinism. The main features of Darwinism, who do not hesitate to speak in his popular lectures, the development man from earlier animal condition. So maybe so man as a divine product, or man as a product of materialistic circumstances and its evolution. So he was the first person, for example, in the history of materialism, who just talked of when he formulated the metaphysical principles of natural sciences. So his only attempt was to discover axiomatic foundations a priori that do not fall, therefore, within the sphere of empirical inquiry, which everywhere rests upon experience and regards the as a given. So experience as a given. Thus, Kant leaves whole compass of scientific thought in its place and in its dignity as the great and only means of extending our experiences of the world given to us through our senses, of systematizing it, thus making the world intelligible to us in causal connection of all phenomena. So the way we perceive the externality of the world and the sense perception, and you can relate them to the material causes and materialistic just interpretation, you can explain in the Kantian scheme the entire things, and it all will ultimately reduce to experience, and experience cannot be considered a priori in that sense. So, for example, starting from an expression of Laplace, for example, Laplace says mind which should know for a given very small period of time the position and movement of all atoms in the universe would necessarily be in the position to derive from these in accordance with the laws of mechanics, whole past and future. So we know it. The ideas of scientific determinism, given the initial conditions. If we know the initial conditions and you give me the laws, you can just exactly predict the entire universe. So the scientific determinism has inspiration from the philosophical materialism, which Kant somehow was able to formulate. You can just infer things. You can infer from this thing. That's it. So now another thing is, for example, materialism is essentially a positive. So if I just come to the important point, how we can crystallize materialism as doctrine. So materialism is essentially a positive philosophy which asserts a fundamental doctrines with dogmatic certainty. One of whose most important assertion it is that by means of these doctrines, the whole world may be easily understood. So it's a sort of optimistic way of looking at the whole world, that this doctrine that world every matter is be all and end all, and you have to have faith in senses or sense perceptions, and there can be regularities, but with that you can also have the other essentials. Why should the need to find control nature, or need to attempt to just observe nature within these prisms and see how we can beneficially benefit from that. But the essential thing is that it's a materialism as such is a positive frame of human mind, or optimistic frame of looking at the world, such that And however much our modern materialists are inclined to skeptical and relativistic fits, however easily they may perhaps talk perhaps of intelligence of the ultimate grounds of all existence, or while whether they or set up the world of man as an order of inquiry, they will not concede, because they one of the so once this author, when he compares philosophical materialism with skepticism, which I was saying, the skepticism as such is a good philosophy, but it's not psychologically tenable. So skepticism has even though philosophical materialism and skepticism are the two ingredients of modern scientific method, but skepticism also can cut materialism in certain finer aspects, that whether our own achievements, materialistic achievements of having faith in this materialism, or a positivistic optimistic way of just working on materialistic philosophy, so can we be skeptic of that? So but what he says that because greatest achievements of materialism in this, that even the activities of soul of man are thoroughly explained as the functions of the matter. So while giving up on the question whether there may be another way of conceiving things, the unintelligibleness intelligibleness of the intellectual element, they will not concede. So a strong materialistic or materialistic philosophy will not concede ultimately to the skeptical element, which may cut it somehow. So there is a profound optimism in the faith. So faith in just for example, even the activities of soul in man and animals are thoroughly explained out as functions of matter. So that's it. Or belief that the knowledge of things can be ultimately expressed as the from the understanding of matter. That's it. So in some way, materialists so to have antipodes. The theologians and the theologizing philosophers understand the doctrines and limits of natural knowledge. They look away at past the grossly materialist character of the views. Force and matter are oh, that's it. I can see it better. So materialism spreads more and more among scientific men, and always first among the most important and most far-seeing them. It does not in any way stay the triumphal march of scientific research if the naive belief in matter disappears. The whole materialistic theory of world is brought about through the senses and the categories of understanding. So this is so now you can have some other part of you can have a materialism if you want to have another way of looking at materialism. Maybe for example idealism. If you want to see an idealistic perspective of things, so idealism in its very nature is a nature metaphysical speculation, although a speculation which may appear to us as the enthusiastic representative of higher unknown truths. The circumstances that an imaginative, creative impulse is contained in our breasts, which in philosophy, art, and religion often comes into direct contradiction with the witness of our senses and understanding, and then again produce creation with the noblest, soundest of men, hold higher than mere knowledge. This circumstances of itself points to the fact that idealism is too connected with unknown truth, although in a very different way from materialism. So when we talk of idealism as a philosophy, you may explain the worlds, but the motivation or the inspiration of those truths, they don't spring from the world or matter or the which we are trying to explain or which we are trying to just make sense of. So they might be higher or unknown truths as compared to materialism. In the witness of all senses, all men agree. Mere judgments of understanding do not hesitate, but the ideas are poetic births. So this is how you can say. So you can just see arts, sciences, philosophy. So you can religion. You can see the differences of idealism and materialism in the fundamental sense. Mm. Ideas are as indispensable for the progress of science as facts. They do not necessarily lead to metaphysics, although they always overstep experience. So it's a critique of materialism in some sense that that ideation as such is not material. It doesn't spring from merely from facts. So one of the, apart from the fact that we have discussed the Kantian way of material, how Kant tried to see things. But the important discourses of, for example, another critique of materialism is, for example, Liebig. He has some contains complaints against materialism. For example, if he quotes on the discourses of Bacon, who is considered one of the pioneers of experimental scientific method, which has skeptical elements. Uh, so, uh, so, for example, he says, in all investigation, Bacon sets out on experiments of their meaning. However, he knows nothing. He looks upon them as a sort of mechanism which, once put in motion, brings forth the result of itself. But in science, all navigation investigations is deductive or a priori. Experiment is but an aid to process of thought, like a calculation. The thought must always and necessarily precede if it is to have any meaning. So this way of looking at things. So even if you take modern science as investigations of science as deductive or a priori, but you experiment should aid a given theory rather than be the starting point. So here, this is a subtle critique of empiricism. Yeah, you can see. So at the end, so if you want to come to the conclusion point of view, so part of it that that we have to leave the unsolved problems of speculation to stand where they stand and as what they really are. That is to say, problems of the theory of knowledge. So what I was trying to just point out is that in our construction of modern day construction of science and scientific knowledge, so the debates, the unflinching and the dominance of philosophical materialism in the general discourse of how we methodologies of sciences operate has its roots historically from medieval times in the debates pre and post, how the author has tried to somewhat take Immanuel Kant as a significant figure and as a cut point. How somehow it got just got cemented post Kantian way up to our times. So this is an important. So there are passages here and there where there's a certain discomfort or in favor of not taking a wholesale philosophical materialism per se, but the articulation has not been in the form of well well thought out alternatives, but at least the articulation of the dominance of philosophical materialism has some limits, and those and it has not to be taken wholesale, and that can be taken from the how we can understand the history of materialism from since and after Kant. So once this debate is clear, then and the debates, allied debates of philosophical materialism, skepticism, idealism, and and this Spinozism, and how different things have evolved. So, if you want to have a proper contextualization in the history, how we can understand current scientific method, so this is a very important, to my understanding. I found it. This is an interesting read. How materialism, history of materialism, pre and post Kant. Kant being one of the important figures in this classification. So I hope you might have found anything, whatever I have said, it might have interest to you. Thanks.